Okay, good morning. If I could ask everybody to take their seats. Please take your seats. There will be coffee breaks and lunch breaks and a cocktail tonight to do more mingling and have side conversations. If I could ask everybody to take their seats. And maybe this is the wrong audience to say it to because you have made it into the room on time, but traffic will get worse every day because of the preparations for UNEA and more people flocking in, and that the same goes for the lines in front of the UN compound. So allowing a bit more time is wise as well for tomorrow. Having said that, I would like to extend warm welcome to day 2. I hope you had productive discussions and some mingling over the cocktail last night, and you also managed to get a bit of rest overnight as well. Today, we will focus on a very crucial element for scale-up of solutions, and that's leveraging finance. And we said it already yesterday, we made multiple allusions to that. On the one side, we have seen less than 2% of climate finance going into methane, less than 1% of development support going into clean air, and that gives us part of the story why we need to focus much more on how we can leverage finance. There is some awakening to this, and the methane finance sprint that led to an amazing $1 billion announcement at the last COP is a major step in. There's other players that are getting involved much more. Here I want to cite the World Bank, but also the Asian Development Bank, the African Development Bank, setting up facilities to help with things going forward. COP29 obviously is expected to be much more focused on climate finance as well. And so how do we use this priority? How do we build up to COP as this group? How do we tap into this? But it's not only about climate finance, right, that we have to sort of get our feet into a bit more. It's also infrastructure finance more widely. It's development support. And I think that's really interesting to keep an eye on how we actually make the most of these opportunities. And how we really work together to make finance more accessible and more efficient. And we're engaging, as you know, there's under the CCIC a finance agenda where we say how we engage with the MDBs, how we engage much more as well with the philanthropic community that's really stepping up and paving the way, showing the lead, as well as the development aid community. And we have a really nice panel here this morning to start talking about that. So we have in this morning session 2 panels, which was a little packed, but we'll manage to do this. The first one is on scaling up subnational action for global impact on climate, health, and agriculture. It's moderated by Sean McGuire, who is the Strategic Partnerships and Communications Director from the Clean Air Fund. And then we have a second panel on country experiences on scaling up implementation of SLCP mitigation, and that will be facilitated by Richard Munang, who is the head of Global Environment Monitoring Systems at UNEP, and a lot of you may know him still from his times when he was in the regional office of UNEP and has been part of a number of our regional workshops already as well. And so I don't want to take up more time and give the floor to Sean for this first panel discussion, scaling up subnational action. And yesterday we alluded to that. It's so critically important that we take a whole of government approach, and the local governments play such a critical role in the implementation. I think it's just a recognition of that. We're really, really happy to have you here today. There's a city summit taking place linked to UNEA as well. So there's a double dividend for you being part in both of these, but it shows as well the recognition to bring sub-regional partners to the table as well. So thank you very much. And with that, Sean, over to you.
Thank you, Martina, and welcome everybody to day 2. So let's get down to business. As Martina said, today we're talking about leveraging finance to scale up implementation, and she tossed out a couple of statistics which basically say that there isn't enough money going into SLCP mitigation, and that's what we want to talk about. But we also want to talk about the efforts that are taking place at different levels to combat climate pollutants and air pollution with the resources and powers that are at the disposal of entities that are less than nation states. And I think, you know, when somebody says subnational, I get puzzled, I scratch my head. What do we mean by subnational? But actually, you know, because it's anything that is sub, you know, unless it's a sandwich, is, you know, like you think it's not a proper thing. But what we mean by subnational are some of the wonderful cities and states around the world, which, you know, we know so well by name. We visit them as tourists, and we go there and enjoy ourselves. And there is where a lot of the great experimentation and piloting and action is taking place to combat climate change. And they're often the places where a real leadership is being shown in the fight to secure our planet against global warming. So it's fantastic that I've got some leaders who are showing how it can be done on the panel with me here today. So I'm really excited for us to get going with a discussion. I think what we'll do is we will look at some of the initiatives and efforts that they're undertaking, and we'll use that as a way of getting into the question of finance and, you know, and how do we fund things that are taking place at less than the nation state level. Often it's a bit harder for cities and states to find resources than the nation states, which have the capacity to raise revenue through direct taxation, et cetera, and borrow on a sovereign level. All right, so let's get going. I'll start by introducing the panel we have, and I'll start on my left with Malik Haidira, a senior climate and energy advisor from the United States Agency for International Development, USAID. And Malik, your specialty is methane, is that right?
That is correct.
Yep, okay, great. So Malik will be helping us understand financing flows into methane and how city and states can engage in the methane abatement issue. And over on my right, we've got Wade Crowfoot, Secretary of Natural Resources from the state of California, United States. Welcome, Wade. Thanks very much for making the long journey here. Looking forward to hearing what you have to say. And to my immediate right, Lorraine Gerrans, Director of Environmental Management of Cape Town from South Africa. Not such a long journey, but fantastic that you were able to come here. Really great to hear a perspective from a different part of this continent. So as I said, I think what we'll do is we'll start by sort of asking the panelists to tell us a little bit about kind of the great work that they're doing to tackle air pollution and short-lived climate pollutants. And I'm going to start with Wade. Wade, you know, California has been a leader. And in some ways, you know, you've set the trends and the bar for the whole of the United States in some of the actions you've taken. And you've got incredible science-based targets to mitigate methane and black carbon and shown real global leadership. Can you reflect a bit on the role that subnational governments can play? And how do you think California has been so successful in showing that leadership? And what's been your secret sauce?
Well, Sean, thanks so much for the invitation, and I'm thrilled to be here today and to learn from so many of you and hopefully meet each other today. It's so important to have this discussion of cities, of states and provinces, of regions, because we are on the front lines of climate change. In California, where I live and work, 7% of our state has been victim to wildfire in the last 5 years. We've had our driest 3 years in the state's 170-year history in the last 4 years, followed by the wettest 3 weeks and huge atmospheric river storms last year. I know my colleague Lorraine from Cape Town could share similar experiences. Our governments are on the front lines of climate change, and so it's critical that we're part of the conversation within the United Nations. We're also on the front lines of climate solutions, specifically including pollution reduction. So I'm excited to be here today to lift up the importance of pollution reduction at the city and state and the regional level, and to share California's story. Briefly, in California, we have passed our first state law to reduce carbon pollution over 15 years ago. and that was specifically focused on CO2 back in 2007 to reduce CO2 levels to 1990 levels by 2020. And we actually achieved that 3 years early. So our legislature has now passed a state law for us to achieve carbon neutrality by 2045, which is similar to a lot of nations around the world. We also passed a law to reduce methane 40% by 2030. Our state leaders realize that we can make important progress quickly on short-lived climate pollutants, and we have to if we're going to stabilize our climate. So I talk about our work in California. If you have the metaphor of a house, those state laws are the foundation of the house. Our targets are legally required. The scaffolding for the house is then the regulatory powers we have to achieve those targets. We have a climate action plan in California that actually has regulatory force. It's called our scoping plan. And it's essentially a big equation of how we are going to achieve carbon neutrality by pollution reduction in each sector. And methane and black carbon and HFCs are an important part of that equation. So I want to share a little bit about what we're doing on methane. So as I said, a 40% required reduction by 2030, and then we have this regulatory program to reduce methane. In California, over half of our methane, 55%, comes from dairies and livestock. About 20% come from landfill, and then 15% come from our oil and gas sector. While we're transitioning to clean energy, we actually produce a lot of oil and gas as well that we're working to phase down and out. So in each of these areas, we have specific regulations for industry, but we also have financial incentives. So I just want to key on one set of financial incentives, because I know, Sean, we're going to evolve the conversation here today to talk about how to bring funding into our governments to tackle short-lived climate pollutants. So on dairies and livestock, many of us around the world obviously are challenged with methane, both from manure from the animals and then enderic, the burping, the flatulation of the animals. And so we have to get that under control. So what we're doing in California is we established a cap and trade program where we are capping our pollution of our stationary sources of pollution, think factories, and actually raising billions of dollars through that program. We're taking that revenue, a portion of that revenue, and subsidizing dairies that are actually doing manure management and actually capturing that manure and turning it into renewable natural gas, anaerobic digesters. Really important, and dairies couldn't make this change without these investments, these subsidies. Also, we have in California what's called the low carbon fuel standard, where we take a portion of revenue from fossil fuels and then pour that back into the development of cleaner fuels. And so those dairies that get subsidized to put in anaerobic digesters and produce renewable natural gas can actually make revenue selling credits into our low carbon fuel program. So those are two important ways where dairies, our agricultural industry, is actually making this change and is going to help us reach our 40% reduction by 2030.
Wade, very interesting. Thank you very much. Fascinating, and I think we will come back to that with a little bit with Malik, the question of methane and how you can raise money and taking that sort of integrated approach. But first of all, I'd like to turn to Lorraine now. So Cape Town, you've pledged to become carbon neutral by 2050. I think you're ahead of the nation state in that regard. And you've got a large kind of air quality management program that you're looking at for the Western Cape. Again, I understand that more progressive than what's being done at the national level there. But as in many parts of Africa, South Africa is really feeling the heavy blows from climate change. And so it would be great to hear your experiences around implementing and facing up to these challenges, and how you think the nation state should be helping you to face up to what you're facing up to.
Thank you so much, Sean, and thank you for the opportunity to be here with you today from Cape Town, representing one of the fastest growing cities in South Africa, also one of the most beautiful, and one of the most biodiverse and environmentally rich areas of our country. And for us, it is incredibly important to be on this journey for carbon neutrality to 2050, meeting also the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals in terms of what it means for cities, for the environment, and for the health and well-being of our residents. So these discussions are very important for us, and as Sean said, at our level, we are somewhat constrained by the policies that our national government takes, but at a local government level in South Africa, we also have great opportunities and can develop our own strategies, which we have done. We have a climate change strategy. We've just last week updated and launched our new energy strategy. We have an environmental strategy, a bioregional plan for biodiversity. So these are all strategies and efforts that we take at local government level to move our agenda forward, because this is where, in South Africa specifically, where the growth is happening. We just last week had a media statement out, almost 60% of infrastructure development in South Africa is happening in the Cape Town region. So people want to live there, people want to be there, businesses want to be there, and we want to be an area where we attract clean businesses, businesses that are going to be part of our journey and our agenda, but we also have to do our part. So we are on a journey to look for sustainable and green energy sources as part of our energy strategy. We want to be a city where the circular economy works well, where we're capturing things like methane, where we recycling waste, where we dealing with other pollutants. And also a city where we look in the long term. So it is not just about the current political leadership or even the current administrations. We look in the long term. So quite a few of our programs have this sort of 2030 and 2050 goals, because we think this is not a short-term journey, and this is where the financing part also comes in, because to make some of these projects a reality, things like technical assistance and financing to make pipelines of sustainable projects is very important for us, and we take advantage of those opportunities wherever we can. Yeah, so from our side, it's wonderful to be here, and want to also learn from you who are here to make contacts with other people and to talk about how we can jointly take this agenda forward. Thanks.
Thank you, Lorraine. And I wanted to come back and just sort of ask you directly a specific around your efforts around solar power generation. I was reading somewhere that one of the big issues for South Africa's carbon footprint is obviously the reliance on coal for power generation, and how much work you've done in the region to try to plug solar into the electricity system and sort of bypassing the national system. And really showing the way on how to set up a system that works financially and is very green.
Yeah, thank you. That speaks right back to the energy strategy and a mayoral program that was set up 2 years ago to start looking at how Cape Town can become more energy independent. Our national energy supply is incredibly carbon heavy. And there's not a sort of a big drive at this stage to change that. There's incremental change, but it's not going to happen in the timescales that we're looking for. Also, you will have heard about a term called load shedding, which has become very much part of our lives, where our energy utility, state-owned, is not able to provide enough energy for our cities and our businesses. So joint goals in climate change mitigation as well as energy security has led us to start looking at our own energy supply solutions. of which wind and solar are the two main options, with some biofuel options in terms of methane capture and so on. In terms of solar, we are very fortunate in Cape Town. Historically, Cape Town had its own power plants and a power grid. And so we still have and maintain that grid as part of the supply, and hence plugging in renewable sources into that grid is easier for us perhaps than other cities that don't own their own grid. And so we're definitely in the planning now for bringing these projects online, both buying from independent power producers as well as producing our own electricity. And there are several projects in the pipeline to do that. And the main goal is to make sure that we are, as much as possible, independent from the impacts of poor management of energy supply at national level, but also meet our carbon goals, where we, as a city, use electricity and energy sources that are low carbon and almost and could be potentially carbon neutral, as opposed to the carbon intensive supply that we get from our national grid.
Brilliant, fantastic example there, I think, of kind of city regional initiative to achieve a number of goals, including sort of financial independence and energy independence, and at the same time hitting your renewable energy targets. So I think we'll be coming back to that kind of an issue. But I wanted to turn to Malik now to talk a little bit about methane. Obviously, Wade has talked about some very practical examples of how a region can tackle its methane emissions. But at USAID, you're supporting governments on methane mitigation and improving air quality. And USAID has been a real leader in the methane finance sprint. And we're going to talk some more about finance in a second. But as part of that, as part of the finance sprint and as part of your programming, how do you think subnational sort of city, regional, state level actors can best contribute to the larger effort to mitigate methane?
Thanks so much, Sean, for actually moderating this session, and thanks for VCCSE to have him here and talk a little bit about what USAID can do to actually help move the needle in terms of methane mitigation. Pretty much USAID is actually working very extensively with many countries to integrate methane mitigation throughout our development programming in agriculture, waste, and the energy sector. In many countries, we work very closely with subnational government as well, because I think those governments actually play a very key role to actually making that happen, right? And I think one thing that would be very actually important, particularly for subnational government, the political will here is very critical to actually, attract more funding to support methane mitigation program, right? And because I think the reason why I'm saying that is that that will actually help, demonstrate a commitment, and with that commitment, that can ultimately, if you will, that is actually a strong signal, right, to not only bilateral aid agencies, but also investors and other donors to think about partnering with those subnational government to tackle methane mitigation. The other thing that can also be done at the subnational government level as well is the development of a policy framework and incentive. And I think Wade also mentioned that a bit in the case of in California. And because that is also very important, particularly in this space of methane mitigation, you need the private sector to play a role as well, in the waste sector as well as in the agricultural sector. Particularly if I take the example of the waste sector, the private sector will be very keen to actually play a role if he understands that the risk is actually mitigated. When the risk is mitigated through a regulatory framework, that can ultimately attract more funding. And that is a role that a subnational government can also play. And the other role that the subnational government can also do to further attract more funding in the methane and SLCB space as well is to think about public-private partnership as well, because that is also another strong signal that it's actually sending to potential partner that not only is serious about it, but he's also willing to put his own funding, right, in this effort, because he believes in it, and it is important for the development of his subnational state, right? So that also is another area where a subnational government can play a key role. And I think lastly here, the community engagement will be very important as well, because it's very important that the subnational government engage the community to help even develop strategies so the community can actually feel involved in the whole process, but also ultimately that will further create and build some sort of a trust from the community in those strategies that the government is actually putting together, and particularly when it comes to the adoption of best practices, right? And that will ultimately contribute to the success of any project that will be funded by any fund that may be raised. So to summarize here, the role that the subnational government can play to further attract more funding in the methane and SLCP mitigation space can be summarized in terms of the demonstration of a commitment and the creation of a regulatory framework and incentive, and then also some public-private partnership and also community engagement as well.
Great, thank you, Malik, and a lovely summary at the end there. I very much picked up on your points around political will, regulatory frameworks, and that critical issue of community engagement, which I think I will ask both Wade and Lorraine about as well, and the role of the subnational entities in attracting further funding. So getting on to the issue of finance, Wade, you told us a little bit about some of the sort of financial structures that you've used in California, a mixture of sort of subsidies, fees, cap and trade, sort of quite sophisticated approaches, and obviously California is a relatively wealthy state. Those are some of the specific tools that you've used. Has there been a challenge in convincing citizens that they should pay for this?
I think there's been a real sea change over the last 10 years in California, but I would guess in many places around the world where citizens, residents are linking climate change to their own health and safety. And that's why it's so important when we talk about air pollution to talk about public health, because science tells us that air pollution kills people and shortens lives. And in California, the wildfires have become so bad in certain seasons that people like my 9-year-old daughter can't play outside for large portions of the summer if we're having a bad wildfire season. So citizens, at least in California, have really connected climate change to their own daily lives. And that's really important for us to continue to connect those dots. I think something like short-lived climate pollutants or methane, that gets complicated, for people. So I think when you are explaining, policy in long paragraphs, you're probably going to lose a lot of people. So there's a lot of conversation that happens in the policy finance space, but we can't confuse that with a much clearer message to our citizens. I also want to say, while I have the mic, because I forgot, there's power in learning from each other. And so we are really excited to help found the Subnational Methane Action Coalition, which are states from five continents, including Africa, Latin America, Asia, Europe, and North America, who are coming together because we care about reducing methane. There's no specific commitment, because we all in different places, but we're really focused on this, Sean, and around learning. And part of this should be what's working in terms of engaging with our public.
Great. I'll press you a little bit because, for instance, in Europe, the agriculture sector it's a difficult sector to engage with. It's very touchy, and politicians are really fearful of going anywhere near it and imposing kind of restrictions and burdens and environmental legislation, and we see lots of protests all the time. But it sounds like you guys have managed to work with the dairy industry to actually put in place some pretty progressive measures around methane there. Did it take some fancy footwork to avoid kind of, sparking a backlash?
We have those challenges in California. Our farming sector, like farmers around the world, are on very small margins and can't, be asked to subsidize huge amounts given that, or they're very concerned about all of these approaches. That being said, we've taken this approach of how can this help you build your economic future? So for example, we are working to divert organic waste from landfills. Obviously, that's about 20% of our methane. We know that with the right reuse, that actually can be used as soil amendment into farms, where we put composting on farms that, yes, it captures and stores carbon, but it also retains water and builds the health of the soils, which are the farmer's most important asset. So we're working actually to subsidize what we call healthy soils, to create the network or the investment such that we take a problem, which is organic waste in our landfills, we divert it and create enough of an economic sort of framework such that then it becomes organic compost that can be put on farms. Now, this isn't, widespread across California. This is small, but I think in answer to this question around agriculture, we have to create these economic systems, these incentives, so farmers understand it's not only the right thing to do, it's the smart thing to do.
Great, thank you for that example. Really helpful illustration of the point. Sort of zooming back out from the kind of the micro back up to a bit more of the macro in my next question to you, Lorraine. Do you have sufficient finance to do the things you think you need to do? And if not, where do you think the funding should come from? Should it be coming from the national level, or should you be getting international lending? Where's the money to come from?
Yeah, thank you. I think there is not a city in the world that will say it has enough money. So no, the answer is no, we don't have enough money. But the financing of these projects are not just about the money. It's not just about the spade in the ground. It's, as I said earlier, it's building a sustainable pipeline of projects that it can be financed. And that is where we sometimes struggle to be able to do that, not necessarily from an expertise point of view, but just to be able to meet the funders' requirements, all the studies you have to do, the feasibilities and so on. So that's where technical assistance has really assisted us a lot. And through networks like SIG40 and ICLEI, we have been able to take advantage of facilities like the CFF, where we are currently in a partnership to look at building a sustainable pipeline of projects in green infrastructure development for climate adaptation. We also have had just last year, significant flooding in Cape Town and the Western Cape. And so, investing in our river systems, for example, is a key important step for us to make ourselves resilient to climate change. So the technical assistance is a great example. I think in terms of the mitigation space, there is a lot of opportunity in cities like Cape Town, where we have good governance and a good credit rating, and can take advantage of the type of finance facilities that are out there. But we also obviously want to partner with our financiers and with the international community. So where there are grant funding opportunities, we take advantage of those as well. So from our side, yes, we are strongly focused on partnerships and building an ecosystem where we do things together, because we don't want to be in isolation, and we want to also learn from international experience. The benefits of being part of the CFF project has been vast for us, just in terms of the technical experience of the people who are in that network assisting us. From our side, we will always be open to discussions around financing. We have wonderful opportunities, what you've mentioned around the methane Definitely in Cape Town, exactly the same. You know, we also have dairy, so this most interesting project. So yeah, projects that will take us on our journey to carbon neutrality we'll definitely look at. And we can assure you that Cape Town spends the money right and in the right place, and we account for it, and we report onto all sorts of platforms, including CDP, on our carbon emissions. So wherever it is possible for us to take advantage of that and give back what we need, we do that.
Great, thank you very much. Very interesting to hear about the ways you're working to access the funds you need to implement the projects that are essential, and that point around technical assistance, we hear that so often from other cities. Cities that aren't so, particularly from cities that aren't so developed as Cape Town, but even very sophisticated cities, struggle in these areas of technical specification to devise and adapt projects to their specific context. So it's a really great point. Turning to you, Malik, again, can you paint a little bit of a picture of how much money has gone into methane abatement, and are there lessons from the methane finance sprint, which has been relatively successful? If I'll do some air quotes here to indicate that you can dispute that if you wish. Relatively successful. So are there any lessons from the methane finance sprint that could be useful for efforts to raise funds for tackling other SLCPs, black carbon, ozone, those other thorny pollutants that we know we need to get on with tackling if we're going to stand a chance of keeping temperature rises under control?
Sure, thanks. Basically, I think as you may have all perhaps seen, heard during COP28, we have estimated about over $1 billion going into methane projects since COP27, and that is just funding from bilateral aid agencies, philanthropic organizations, and the private sector. And in addition to that, you want to add nearly $3.5 billion from international financial institutions that have pretty much allocated that much money to support methane mitigation projects around the world. It is seen as a big success, pretty much, right? And as you compare that achievement to where we were during COP27, it is a huge progress, right? And I think this is pretty much something that were prompted as a result of the methane finance sprint that was launched by President Biden during the June 2023 Major Economic Forum. As part of that finance sprint, there was a call to raise at least $200 million from bilateral aid agencies, philanthropic organizations, and as well as private sector to support methane projects. That was pretty a flaw of fundraising that President Biden set and his team set. But we were really pleased to be able to estimate way more than that flaw. So that was actually a wonderful success. In terms of lesson learned that we can pick up from the methane space to other SLCP, I think here is first of all a launch of an initiative such as the methane finance sprint is actually very key. But I think that initiative alone, there's a lot of work that has been done behind the scene to further mobilize funding from other government. I have my colleague Mike Laurie here in the room, who was actually, and his team was actually play a big role in that. So we and significantly engage with other bilateral agencies. For example, in our case of USAID, reach out to other agencies and trying to advocate for more funding and share our experience, right, in how we have been able to go from zero methane funding to nearly in 2023 alone, we have actually allocated over $13 million just for to support methane mitigation projects, right? And reaching out to other agencies to share our experience was very pivotal because, as you all know, methane is being actually addressed as a co-benefit in for development projects, and many bilateral aid agencies do not really have methane mitigation as a key objective. USAID, we didn't have methane mitigation as a primary objective of our development programming before COP26, when the Global Methane Pledge was launched. It required a lot of awareness raising to really realize the opportunities that our program have to offer to do that. So when we met with many bilateral aid agencies, we heard many times, oh, we don't do methane. But when you probe further and as you realize that they do have a lot of livestock productivity improvement projects, they have solid waste management projects, right? And then they often even have projects that is actually promoting access to biodigester, energy source from biodigester and all of that. And we're like, exactly, those are really good examples that can lead to actually reducing methane emissions. So we just need to come up with some sort of paradigm shift so people, our sister agencies can come and then trying to actually measure the methane mitigation impact of their program. So lesson learned, a lot of awareness raising needs to be done, and then the link to the mitigation aspect to the development objective as well is also key, because climate mitigation, for the sake of climate mitigation, yes, it's very important. We need to do that. But I think you will get more ears, you will get more, if you will, buy-in from not only where the fundings are getting approved within our countries to actually get to support more projects. Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Malik, and I think that's a great point, and a really interesting illustration of how you can take a relatively neglected issue and sort of, with the right kind of the right energy and political focus, you can pull funding in and get people to work on the problem. So a lesson there for us for other issues. I'm conscious that we might be running out of time. I'm hoping I can go on a little bit longer because I know we have to switch to another panel. But we did start a little late, so I think we've got time for one more question or one more round. So I'll turn back to Wade. And I don't think we can finish a session on subnational actors, cities and states, without looking at that issue, the issue of the relationship between the city and state and the national level and national level governments. And it's a space potentially of tension, potentially of cooperation. How does a state manage that relationship and manage to hold firm to its own agenda? Be good to hear how you're doing that in California.
Yeah, thanks, Sean. And since you took a bit of issue with that term subnational, I'll share with you that one of our American governors, Jay Inslee, uses the word supranational governments because in many ways, local governments, regional governments are doing so much. But this question around, I just lost my train. The relationship between the national governments. Look, all of our situations are different. In the United States, our American states are devolved with a lot of legal power. And so in a place like California, we largely have control of our energy system. We can create binding regulations on industry. But in a lot of places, the nation, or the states or the provinces can't. And more political power lies with the cities. So it's different in different places. But what I'll say is, and I'll say something fairly provocative, the United Nations and this international process would be crazy not to centralize, not to institutionalize our governments more into implementation. Because at the end of the day, we are in a race against time, and we all know this, both on climate change and biodiversity loss. And our governments, looks different in different countries, are taking real action and making real gains, reducing pollution and addressing biodiversity loss. So why not find a way to formalize those commitments, to count those actions because our nations need it. Our nations, as they go into the COP30 and the update of the nationally determined contributions, need more tailwinds. So I think it's critically important. I guess last point I'll say is we have to frame this, whether it's methane or climate change mitigation, as an opportunity. And that's why we're successful in California with our populace. Because if we only say this is something we have to do for the fate of the planet, it gets backburnered when we have tough global economic times like this. We have to demonstrate this is an opportunity. In Cape Town, for example, learning from Lorraine that shifting to renewable energy is about energy independence, and it's about protecting themselves from load shedding. And in California, our governor talks about he wants to dominate the clean tech industry in the United States because of this opportunity. And lastly, I'll say for agriculture, which we share across the world, we have to create this as an opportunity for farmers to improve their soil, to improve their practices, improve their bottom line. So it's not just a global imperative, it's an opportunity.
Great, thank you very much, Wade. And I really like this idea of the UN sort of leaning into the power of the city and state, and formalizing it in some way, tracking it within an NDC type process. And I think anything, we won't have time to come back to this question of community engagement, which you raised earlier on, but anything I think that brings the sort of the efforts of the ordinary citizen up to the kind of the international level and connects the two has to be worthwhile. So Lorraine, briefly from you, how is the relationship between the state and the national level? Are you on your own, or can you work together?
No, we're not on our own. We do have a very good relationship with our national government, especially around air quality matters. It's an area where we get good support. In fact, our national government has instituted quite progressive changes, for example, to sulfur content in fuels. We have very good regulations. The challenge lies in the implementation. It is difficult for cities sometimes, especially cities without financial resources, to ensure that those regulations are actually met. It's the air quality monitoring, it's taking action, it's the enforcement. We are fortunate in Cape Town. We have a small but very effective air quality unit, and we are able to meet the national requirements, especially around the city's own operations. To a large extent. So from the point of view of working together in our country with our legal framework, there is no other way than to be able to you must work together. There's not a lot of funding coming from national government to the cities around air quality, and that is a challenge. I think, around air quality, the short-term emissions as well as long-term carbon, the programs are at national level and not a lot of funding is flowing down to us. We have called for a fund perhaps, or a grant fund. We do have a funding mechanism where we get an equitable share of the national tax revenue. And we have asked for programs specifically around climate change. But we also, we do adapt some of the funding that we get towards those co-benefits. So wherever we do, for example, a transport project, public transport project, the co-benefit is air quality improvements in our city, taking cars off the road and so forth. So it's a complicated space, but in air quality specifically, we have a good relationship, but the challenge lies in the implementation. And we are not, I would say, on our own, but from funding that service to our residents, it's largely done from the tax base of the city.
Great, thank you very much. A really interesting illustration of how you're having to adapt to the limitations of the context you operate in. Just turning very briefly to you, Malik. Obviously, you work at the national level. So you look at this maybe from the other side of the other end of the telescope, if you like. Just very quickly, some reflections on how national level can work well with city and state level to respecting each other's powers to implement strong methane mitigation.
There are actually a lot of opportunities there. I think the starting point here is action planning, right? I think subnationals or cities, can definitely be supported by the national level to develop the action plan where they will be actually identifying key mitigation priorities and set ambitious targets. That actually will be a starting point. And then I think at the same time here, when we talk about the regulatory framework as well, it's going to be very key because even if the subnational want to come up with some new policies and regulation, right? I think it will need the support of a national government as well to not only facilitate the implementation of those policies. So that will be also. And then the other thing that will be really critical here, often in many countries, particularly where the budget process is more centralized, I think the subnational may need to send a strong signal to the national level so the national budget can have a line item that will actually target specific programs that have been identified by the subnational government. And often those programs that have been sort of like identified in the action plan that I indicated earlier. That's why I always say the action planning is actually the starting point for that.
Great, thank you, Malik. We're going to draw the panel to a close to allow the next panel to come up and talk about country experiences on scaling up implementation of SLCP mitigation. So I've really enjoyed this discussion, really enjoyed hearing the views from California, from Cape Town, and from Washington as to the challenges and the successes and the opportunities that city and state level action on SLCP and air quality can experience. Fascinating illustrations from all of you. So I'd like to ask the audience to join me in appreciating the panel and letting them get on with the rest of their days.
Thanks, Tom. Thank you very much. Well done, Melissa.
So while we're changing our panel, and I also want to join my thanks to both the panel and a fantastic facilitator, moderator of our panel. Thank you, Sean, for a great job. I would like to call upon Bankslave. We said yesterday we have a mural, and he's the graffiti artist who is painting that. I did encourage you already to have a quick look around the corner, but if you could come to the stage, tell us a little bit about your motivation, and at the same time, while we're hearing that, I would like to ask the panelists of the next panel to come up on the stage. So just make your way up while we listen to Bankslave. And really good to have you here. I mentioned it yesterday at the reception already. I'm absolutely amazed about the message that comes out of that mural, and I'll let you talk to your motivation why and what you're up to.
All right. Thank you very much for having me here as an artist. I want to give my vote of thanks to the Clean Air for having me here and to have this language of art that is different, that is of a different scope than what you're used to. So for me, I'm going to be doing a mural at the back of this building, and I hope you're going to walk by and get inspired out of it about what we have to fight against what the climate has gone to, and then we have to maintain our clean air. And this is going to be shown on the mural that I'm going to be doing. So hopefully you can be there just for support and to protect our little wings that we have already. And so as artists, the Clean Air Fund has been at least visioning using an artist, and for me as a Kenyan artist, joining up and being the second time that I'm here the first time that I've done a mural at the city square, city area in the city. And it's the second time I'm here to show my art, and I hope you all are gonna pass by and get inspired or just join in or do like a signing on the mural as I continue creating it. Thank you.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much. And indeed, great thanks to the Clean Air Fund having helped to pull this off with the necessary funding behind that. And now I'm handing over to Richard. I introduced you already in the morning when I said, well, we'll have two panels. So Richard Munang, colleague in UNEP, now dealing with the early warning systems, and beforehand, Regional Office of Africa, and I'm sure you've all come across him. Wonderful panel, very mixed. Here we go, floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Martina, and esteemed colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this very important session today, which in the next 40 minutes, we're going to have conversation around country experiences on scaling up the implementation of short-lived climate pollutants. And as you can see, I'm joined by esteemed panelists, and I'm joined here by Madam Asmao Jibril from Nigeria, who is the Assistant Director of Climate Clean Air Coalition, focal point as well, and also the West African Alliance on Carbon Markets. And from Vietnam, we have Mr. Tran, who is the Director of Department of Natural Resources, as well as from Chile, we have Madam Camila, who is the Head of Mitigation and Transparency Department. And from Ghana, we have Madam Juliana, who is the Principal Program Officer from the Environment Protection Agency. To Morocco, we have Mr. Abdelé, who is the Climate Clean Air and Coalition National Focal Point. And from Côte d'Ivoire, we have Mr. Benjamin Bridad. Ladies and gentlemen, it is said that a bird that flies off the earth and lands on an anthill is still on the ground. This African proverb analogizes the direction that the globe is actually taking and needs to take with short-lived climate pollutants, which in one word can be summed up as ambition. We know that short-lived climate pollutants, which are primarily methane, black carbon, and hydrocarbons, that are also called superpollutants, remains in the atmosphere for less time than carbon dioxide. But much needs to be done. And so with this panel here today, we are going to understand how CCAC work has actually helped not only in generating experiences, but in providing information that can help pave the way forward in increasing this ambition. I will start off with Nigeria. And Madam Asmo, Nigeria has been a partner with the Climate Clean Air Coalition since the inception in 2012. And during this time, what we know is that the country's Council of Ministers have actually approved a national plan to reduce short-lived climate pollutants. And the 22 priority measures, the plan have actually identified and projected to result in about 83% reduction in black carbon. What I would like to hear from you in 2 minutes is your experience of how Nigeria, since the inception in 2012, has actually changed the path of how short-lived climate pollutants mitigation can take the country forward.
Thank you very much, Richard, and good morning, everyone. So like Richard has said, we have developed a national action plan to reduce the short-lived climate pollutants with 22 mitigation measures, which was approved by the highest policy-making body in Nigeria, that is the Federal Executive Council, which includes the president himself and all the ministers of the nation. So first of all, we had to do some initial awareness creation, sensitization and mobilization of stakeholders to catalyze action on the SLCP mitigation. And then we developed a strategy plan on how to work on the mitigation measures. That is including the Ministry of Budget and National Planning as part of the key stakeholders, so as to have green projects approved to help in the mitigation of these SLCPs. They were also part of the sensitization and some capacity building done with this ministry, and also collaboration with partners, international partners, to help with the funding of some of these projects. Also, we work hand in hand with the ministries, departments and agencies that are working on specific projects. So they're part of our key stakeholders. For example, if it's an agric project, maybe on reduction of methane from dairy or from the livestock, we work with the Ministry of Agric. This is just an example. And then with the oil and gas sector, which is the major highest emissions, where we get the highest emissions of methane, because Nigeria is an oil and gas based economy. So we've been working with the oil and gas sector, and we were able to develop the methane mitigation, the methane, sorry, we were able to develop a methane emissions reduction guidelines with the oil and gas sector. So we have that already, and then we're working on the implementation right away now.
Yeah, thank you very much for that update. You've mentioned before I move to the next panelist about the policy, and we know that Nigeria is the first country in Africa to regulate methane emissions in the energy sector, and this is through the country's methane guidelines, which mandates that companies implement leak detection and repair measures in the oil and gas infrastructure. Is this being implemented?
Yes, this is being implemented, and as part of the implementation strategy, the government has initiated stakeholder sensitization and capacity building, like I said. We've done workshops on the guidelines, and this is to provide ease for compliance. And then we've allowed the operating companies to conduct the LDAR surveys in-house, and having every 6 months a third-party validation.
Excellent.
Yeah.
I'll come back to that again. I think now I will get to Mr. Tran from Vienna. What I would like you to put in perspective in 2 minutes, we know that Vietnam has been a partner of CCAC since 2017. And within this time, we know that in Vietnam, agriculture is actually responsible for 1/3 of Vietnam's greenhouse gas emissions, with livestock and rice production being the primary source. However, the country has actually been working with the Climate Clean Air Coalition. So I would like you in 2 minutes to explain to us, to understand how the Climate Clean Air Coalition has changed the part of short-lived climate pollutant mitigation in your country.
Good morning. I'm coming from the Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development in Vietnam, so this is why I want to say about the perspective from the Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development. As Peter mentioned about we joined the CCAC from the 2017, actually agriculture sectors, not the whole country at the time. And as you know, that 1/3 of our emission is coming from the agriculture sector, but very interestingly is that most of the emission from agriculture sectors are considered as the SLCP, falling under the level of the fields of the CCAC. So this is why we don't have the strategies to implementing reduction of SLCP alone. We combine this in the strategies, the planning reduction plans of GHG emission, or the GHG emission and methane in agriculture sectors. And so we work with CCAC, and we receive a lot of support from CCAC and other developing partners in supporting us from the forming the different mechanisms, like endowing the strategies, applying the strategies for the reducing the SLCP, and we're also working in the providing the tools and the technical, especially the knowledge sharing, so that we know to focus on the areas of where the most SLCP in general or the methane emission coming from, so that we can be able to form and prioritize the most technically and economically feasible measures. Because you know that is agriculture in Vietnam, we have like more than 10 million farmers. It's this providing also a very big challenging for implementing any GHG reduction methods because of the land fragmented, small scales, high transaction costs, the availability of the co-benefits so that the farmer can be applied. We cannot put the burden of reducing greenhouse gas emission on the shoulder of the farmer. So we need to bring the most economically co-benefits so that the farmer can be getting not only the reducing of the greenhouse gas emission, but also probably to have the opportunity to increase the economics.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Mr. Tran. I just want to follow up on this aspect. Someone listening, a country representative listening, and they are focused on agriculture and also focused on rice production. What would you say have been the transformational shift with the support of CCAC in helping Vietnam do one thing that have actually taken the country forward, not just in reduction of emissions, but in also creating opportunities? Please, in 1 minute.
I think the key that CCAC is connecting us with the tool and the sharing, to bring together, because we also joined the US in the agriculture hub, so that this platform is the opportunity for us not only discussing about the strategies or the shipping towards the more feasible and economically feasible, technically feasible, and also co-benefit for the different measures, and also providing the tools, especially the tools, so that we can be able, in order to making the good plans, you need to measure or have the good inventory. You know, CCIC providing us with the support to forming the guidelines for the, even though we're following the IPCC, the guidelines, but we also need to have the customized it into the Vietnam context. So that is, I think, the good contribution or big contribution from working with CCAC in shifting the paradigms of focusing on the most feasible measures.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Good inventory, guidelines and tools, very, very important. Yes, to you, Madam Camila, to Chile. Having been a partner of CCAC since its inception in 2012, and also at the same time, with guidance from CCAC, what we know is that Chile increased its aspiration to be able to mitigate black carbon by stepping up their black carbon mitigation by 25% in the next 7 years from there in their NDCs. In 2 minutes, please, I would appreciate if you can give not just the progress you've made, but also the change in the path of how short-lived climate pollutants mitigation have happened in Chile.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. So yeah, the CCAC helped us at the beginning with a national consultant, and he helped us developing our black carbon inventory. And we were also working for many years in plans for clean air. So we put these two things together, and then we were able to have this goal on our NDC. And then also the CCAC helped us on projections of black carbon, and taking in account the carbon neutrality scenarios that we were working for climate change. So then we see how the impact on black carbon for decarbonization. So we have both views, so clean air and how that impacts on climate change, and then how climate change impacts on black carbon. And then now the next step is we have to develop sectorial mitigation plans, which main goal is it's climate change. But as we have in our NDC and in our long-term climate strategy also goals on black carbon, then the different sectors also have to include additional measures on reducing black carbon and then helping also clean air and not only climate change.
Excellent. It should be noted that Chile is actually one of the few countries globally to include black carbon into their nationally determined contributions. But I would like, before I get to the next panelist, the city of Santiago currently has the second largest fleet of electric buses in the world. And in multiple cities in your country, Chileans are actively choosing to use electric transportation over other modes of travel. Can you, in 1 minute, explain the shift in behavioral patterns that led to these?
Well, it's also impulsed by these both objectives. So clean, because in Santiago we also have very bad air sometimes, but we can have a monitoring system so we can detect when the bad air is coming. So we have restrictions on which cars can go around. So because of clean air, electric vehicles are very important, but also for climate change, because it's like the most, and now as our electric matrix is being greener, our main source of CO2 is transport.
Excellent, thank you very much for that. And then we'll move to Ghana. And Ghana, Madame Juliana, Ghana has been a partner of CCAC since its inception, like many other countries in 2012. And within this time, Ghana was the first country in the world to include short-lived climate pollutants and other air pollutants into their fourth official national greenhouse gas inventory that was submitted to the UNFCCC. And Ghana has also launched its National Action Plan to mitigate short-lived climate pollutants, which identify 16 mitigation measures across different sectors. Please, in 2 minutes, explain how CCAC changed the path of short-lived climate pollutants mitigation in Ghana.
Thank you very much for the question, and good morning to everyone. I would first of all want to say thank you to CCAC for giving us the opportunity to share our experience. Like you rightly said, Ghana has been one of the early movers of this coalition. Starting from 2012 till date, we've been with CCAC. And so to begin with, right from the inception stage and at the national planning processes, CCAC supported Ghana to take a holistic look at our emission profile. We looked at what the sources are, and then how we'll be able to integrate the issues of SLCPs into these sectors, and then what the impacts are. With the support of CCAC, we could also draw a link between climate change and air pollution, and then distill what the benefits are. So after looking at the fourth national communication, and then even the fifth national communication, looking at 7 sectors which we could draw up where these sectors and then the SLCPs could come from, which included the transport sector, waste, energy, health, amongst others. With the support of CCAC, we could also develop our national action plan, just as you rightly mentioned, with 16 mitigation measures, and the key ones that we focused on were on the cook stove, and then soot-free buses, the REs, and then the energy efficiency in appliances. And taking a look at these areas, it aligns very well with our NDCs, and this also includes measures to reduce SLCPs. So in 2021, Again, Ghana submitted its updated nationally determined contributions to the UNFCCC, and then on that we looked at 47 program of actions, of which 19 of them were focused very much on SLCPs.
Excellent. Let me just jump in there, Juliana, and touch on an aspect, and in 1 minute I would like to get your perspective from this, because Ghana started to monitor, as you've rightly said, and report on greenhouse gas emissions resulting in the Ministry of Finance, starting to track climate support and ending up with developing a climate finance tracking tool and establishing an online climate data hub for reporting. How did this happen? Please, in 1 minute.
Thank you very much. And so this is actually done right from the support that CCAC gave us, where we started strengthening institutions, because we looked at financial flows from different sectors across the country. And so we thought of coming together and then building capacities of these different institutions, and then making sure to be able to track what kind of financing comes through to the different institutions across all sectors. And so we were able to come out with 53 indicators that we developed. And then after we developed these indicators, we developed also a template and gave it to the institutions to be able to track the financial flows that comes into all these sectors.
Great. Thank you very much for that. And we move to Morocco now. Mr. Abdelali, Morocco joined CCAC in 2014, and there have been strides. Full implementation of the plan is projected to reduce particulate matter PM 2.5 in the transport sector by 51.6%. Also, with CCAC support, we know that Morocco has succeeded in enhancing its NDCs. Please, can you in 2 minutes explain the lessons learned and the experiences that have helped to shift and move forward to the mitigation of short-lived climate pollutants in Morocco?
OK. Merci beaucoup, donc, Richard. Je vais parler en français. J'espère que vous allez donc avoir le temps de mettre vos casques. Comme ça, je serai plus, comment dire, plus confortable dans le message que vous voudrez passer. Donc, vous savez qu'à l'instar des pays membres de la CCAC, nous avons également réalisé notre plan d'action national de réduction des émissions donc, de SLCP, et bien sûr avec une modélisation assez fine des différents process et des différents usages donc dans les différents secteurs, d'ailleurs, qui sont les mêmes secteurs adressés au niveau même de l'inventaire des émissions de gaz à effet de serre. Et dans ce cas-là, donc, il y a un certain nombre donc, de mesures qui ont été proposées et qui ont été alignées également avec les mesures déjà identifiées dans le cadre de la CDN, lesquelles CDN, même la dernière CDN révisée donc, en 2021, qui a porté, disons, l'ambition du Maroc de réduire de 45,5% sa valeur de réduction. Maintenant, revenons au transport pour être plus bref et sur les mesures donc, développées dans ce sens-là. Je voudrais revenir en arrière pour dire qu'il y a eu un processus de préparatoire pour aller, disons, au transport, d'abord par commencer par le côté réglementaire et législatif, notamment la loi relative à la lutte contre la pollution de l'air, qui a permis donc d'identifier, disons, de préciser tout type de rejet qui ne doit pas être autorisé à être émis, donc rejet qui soit liquide, solide, gazeux, toxique, corrosif, des fumées, des vapeurs, etc. Donc il était tellement exhaustif sur ça qu'ils ne doivent pas être autorisés selon des normes et des standards bien précisés donc, sur le plan réglementaire. Et donc, laquelle loi, donc, bien sûr, également précise dans son article 2 comment dire, la responsabilité donc, des uns et des autres, donc qu'ils soient personnes physiques, morales, etc., dans ces choses-là. Et puis, pour arriver, donc, avant d'arriver à l'aspect transport, il y a eu aussi un effort considérable sur la qualité des carburants. Et donc, depuis pratiquement avant 2007, déjà, nous avions un taux donc, de soufre dans le diesel, par exemple, de plus de 10 000 ppm. Et donc, à partir de 2007, nous sommes passés à un taux donc, de 50 ppm, donc de 10 000 à 50 ppm au niveau du diesel, avec bien sûr le bannissement de l'essence du superplan, du plan, donc dans l'essence du super. Et puis, à partir du début 2015, on a aussi passé donc, de 50 ppm à 10 ppm. Aujourd'hui, donc, les 10 ppm sont en vigueur sur le territoire national depuis donc, 2015. Et donc, à partir également de 2021, pour passer à la norme donc Euro 6, la norme Euro 6, là, il y a eu 2 décrets qui ont été aussi mis en place, deux décrets ministériels, donc un émanant du ministère de l'Énergie et des Mines et un autre émanant du ministère des Transports et de la Logistique, qui permet donc de...
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Abdelali. I would like you to, those points that you've mentioned, yes, Morocco identified transport sector, they've identified household energy, industry, livestock. I would appreciate in 1 minute, to just explain how Morocco is leveraging the lessons from CCAC to improve the household waste sector, especially from the perspective that Morocco is planning to improve the household waste sector by converting waste into biogas. 1 minute, Monsieur.
Merci. Comment donc on utilise un peu les résultats et les efforts donc déjà entrepris dans le cadre de cette collaboration avec la CCAC et avec les différents membres de la CCAC? D'abord, il y a cette opportunité d'échange de bonnes pratiques entre les uns et les autres, qui est déjà donc une chose donc de très bonne. Et puis également, il y a l'autre chose, c'est que le travail réalisé au niveau donc des mesures qui ont été analysées, scrutées donc dans leurs détails au niveau donc de leur émission, a permis de donner une âme aux différentes mesures, notamment par la précision des différents co-bénéfices et différents impacts. Et cette chose-là, donc les SLCP ont permis de donner un peu plus donc de sens aux mesures de la NDC, de telle manière que, bien sûr, les co-bénéfices sur la santé, l'agriculture et le bien-être, d'une manière générale, a été bien précisé dans le cadre de la CDN, ce qui fait donc, ça a permis donc de donner plus d'intégration et plus de précision des impacts et des co-bénéfices, donc, notamment donc, au niveau donc, de ces mesures-là. Et donc, voilà, donc je pense que ça a été une très bonne opportunité. Donc,
Merci beaucoup. Monsieur Benjamin Bridat, félicitations à la Côte d'Ivoire pour avoir gagné la Coupe d'Afrique. The CCSC work in Côte d'Ivoire started long time ago, and Côte d'Ivoire actually was one of 15 countries that addressed the short-lived climate pollutants. We worked together on this, address air pollution. In their first NDCs, this was integrated. Please, in 2 minutes, if you can be able to just share your experience of how CCAC have actually shifted not just short-lived climate pollutants mitigation, but the opportunities that is created in Côte d'Ivoire.
Thank you, Richard. I think it's a great pleasure and honor to be here with you on this panel. You were there at the exception of the CCAC SNAP process in Côte d'Ivoire with Martina. And I think it's a great pleasure here to share the progress on this panel today. By the time we were launching this in Côte d'Ivoire, you know, like many other African developing countries, the capacity for mitigation planning was not really there. So we engaged with CCAC lead partners on this, what we call the multiple benefit pathway approach, exploring mitigations measure to address both short-lived climate pollutant, but also GHG emissions.
And this has been very useful for the country in terms of developing the capacity for mitigation planning, improving on the capacity that was already there for data collection through national communication and BURs, but also in terms of mitigation specifically, we were able to improve on our skills to assess our key assumptions, but also different mitigation pathways. And now, building on this experience, we have a new NDC that is very robust with 38 mitigation measures, of which 18 are addressing short-lived climate pollutant methane specifically. And more importantly for this, we are one of the first countries to highlight in the NDC the health benefit of implementing these 38 mitigation measures.
Very, very important. And Côte d'Ivoire have adopted the national short-lived climate pollutants action plans, as you said, which outline the mitigation measures, which, if they are fully implemented, would lead to 59% reduction in black carbon. What I would like to hear in 1 minute before I open up to the plenary and then come back to the panelists to move to the last round of the questions is, to what extent are these plans and identification of these measures now actually getting implemented? And how are you bringing in the Ministry of Health, the Ministry of Finance, the Ministry of Agriculture? In 1 minute, please.
Yes, I think having this robust analysis for the NDC that will highlight all the benefit, particularly health, is very important to create the necessary political buy-in, because we know that the health issue is very important for the local and the benefit that could be derived from that. We had the advantage of having a ministry, our Minister of Environment, who has a background in health, so he helped a lot in establishing this narrative. And having that into our NDC, but also other specific reports such as the CCDR, creates more advocacy power to this document, and then it gives it more strength for implementation, for discussion with the donors.
Thank you very much, Benjamin, and to all the panelists, please. Let's open up to the plenary, please. And if you have a question, put your mic on, and then your question will be taken. Without questions, it means the panelists are doing an amazing work. And so I'll get back to how I started, and I will get back now to Nigeria. Thank you very much again for the excellent work that Nigeria is doing. Before, when I started off, I did ask you about the implementation of the regulation, which you did already touch. But what I would like is now, as we're running up, the next steps of what you think practically could actually be, how will the next NDCs of Nigeria actually already increase the ambition for the NDCs, and how do you think all the excellent work that has been done under the Climate Clean Air Coalition, done on short-lived climate pollutants, how do you see it being taken forward over the next 5 years? 2 minutes.
Yes, a lot of work has been done. The SLCPs was included in the NDCs, which also help us to scale up from 45% conditional the conditional NDC to 47%.
Correct.
So where we added 2 sectors from the 5 sectors we had. So a lot of work has been done, especially on adding the fugitive methane reduction of 60% by 2031. And also we have the the use of clean and efficient cook stoves that is in the NDC. So what I see is that there will be more SLCP inclusions in the next NDC that will be revised by the 2025, And with the support of the CCAC, the support helped us to add all these SLCPs into the
NDCs.
Into the NDCs.
So if there was one recommendation you would give, what would it be?
I recommend that we bring together the key stakeholders, stakeholder mobilization, and then having available funds, and then working closely with the, I can say, the NDC partnership that has helped us to.
And who are these key stakeholders you will recommend?
So the key stakeholders are those that the national, from the national government, our partners, international partners, and also the private sector.
Yes, before I move to the next panelist, the word youth and informal sector didn't come up. To what extent do you think they should be included? Please, 30 seconds.
So we have the youth already included in our climate change activities in Nigeria, and the subnational, and what was the other one you said?
Informal sector.
Yeah, the informal, they're all included. They're all stakeholders in our climate change activities in Nigeria.
Excellent. Mr. Tran, I would appreciate in 2 minutes as you run up, what next? How will the next NDCs reflect all this good work that you did indicate that has been done in Vietnam? And then your recommendation in 2 minutes.
For Vietnam, I think is among the very few countries have the very ambitious commitment for the reducing greenhouse gas emission. We are double commitments from the NDC submitted in 20 to the compared to the what we submitted in the new one. The newest one is in 2022. Like for the unconditional from 9% to the 16%, with the conditional one from 27% to the almost like a 44%. So we're also committed to bring to the economy with the net zero emission by 2050. So this very ambitious one is very much related. We need to, I think, very important for Vietnam. And we're working under support from CCAC. We're looking at mobilizing the stable financial resources because you know that for the developing country, the finances for the implementing NDC commitment is, I think now they only may accommodate about 10%, so that we have the big gap of the financing it. This is why we're looking for the more sustainable financer to our, for instance, going to piloting with the maybe carbon markets or things like that. So we have them, and also engagement of the different stakeholders throughout the multiple platform and dialogues, so that we can have the go along with the different stakeholders along the value chains.
Good. Thank you very much. So your recommendation in 10 seconds.
I think my recommendation is that we need to go with our own stakeholder in the value chain towards a low carbon value chain, rather than looking at only the supplies on the production stage. Because if we can be able to promote the demands for the low carbon products in the demand side, then we can be able to create the sustainable financial resources to implementing the NDC target. I think only this way we can be able to achieve what we integrated the effort of the whole world to achieve our commitment.
Thank you very much for that. Yes, all stakeholders in the value chain. Yes, to you, Camila, what says you as next steps and your recommendation in 2 minutes or less?
Thank you. So, well, we're actually now really working a lot on implementing our current NDC. So we are also thinking on our new NDC, but it's very hard to set more ambitious targets when the current targets are already ambitious, and it's hard for us to get there. For example, we have our national organic waste strategy, which sets goals for 2040 and says what technology and how we can get there. But when we want to implement that strategy, it's not enough to have the goals and the how we can get there, because there are not the right incentives in the local level for them to change the way they do things. So we have to create new policies and laws to enforce those changes. So it's very slow to the implementation. But I think, yeah, to work with the local level, it's very important, and maybe include something about that on our new NDC might be a good start.
Excellent recommendation. Working with the local level, yes, Ghana, what is the way forward? And your recommendation?
Okay. Thank you, Richard.
2 minutes or less, the better.
I think with the support that we've received so far from CCAC, it's provided Ghana with a space to reflect the SLCP's mitigation opportunities in our NDCs, and to ensure that also there's policy attention to address development benefit of SLCP's actions. And so moving forward, the plan is that we'll have in our NDCs focusing more on the sectors that are hard to abate. For example, we want to focus on the categories in the oil and gas sector. We would also want to focus on agriculture and then waste, and then we'll also ensure that we emphasize on building and the NDC achievement from 2016 to date.
Excellent. Thank you very much. That was below a minute. Monsieur Abdelali, 2 minutes, s'il vous plaît. What is the way forward? 2 minutes.
Merci Richard. Donc, vous savez, comme j'ai dit tout à l'heure, nous avons aujourd'hui dans le pipe cet appui de la CCAC pour mener d'autres projets, notamment dans le secteur des déchets. Donc, il y a une feuille de route qui est aujourd'hui en cours de préparation. Et il y a également un projet orienté vers l'évaluation du potentiel du méthane dans 3 décharges. Et au-delà donc de ces études-là, vraiment le souhait, c'est d'aller à la mise en œuvre donc, de ces projets. Comment les implémenter? Et c'est la meilleure façon de convaincre et de sensibiliser aussi les décideurs au niveau locaux. Donc, c'est par la démonstration, c'est par le pilote, etc., qu'on pourrait donc faire ce genre de choses. Et bien sûr, ceci dit, comme vous le savez, donc, nous, dans le cadre de notre CDN, il y a également un certain nombre de secteurs sur lesquels nous portons un grand effort, notamment au niveau de la génération d'électricité par les renouvelables. Et l'objectif déjà de 2030, c'est d'arriver à 52% la part des productions électriques par énergie renouvelable sur le plan national. Aujourd'hui, où nous parlons, nous sommes autour de 40% déjà aujourd'hui donc sur le plan national. Et donc également, il y a d'autres priorités et orientations qui sont apparues donc, pour récemment, notamment par exemple l'orientation dans le domaine de l'hydrogène vert à partir d'énergies renouvelables. Et comme vous le savez, les changements climatiques, ça a été aussi également rappelé ce matin avec l'État de la Californie, avec les impacts donc, de la sécheresse que nous avions connue depuis longtemps et qui ont eu un impact sur le stress hydrique, sur le manque d'eau donc, au niveau donc, du Maroc. Merci. Ce qui fait qu'on est orienté vers le dessalement de l'eau de mer par recours aux énergies renouvelables et par conséquent aussi ce sont des priorités donc, futures dans ça. Ce que je peux, comme recommandation, il y a encore, disons, un manque dans la qualité des données qui permettent donc comment dire, de faire de la bonne planification et de la bonne modélisation donc, de l'évolution des différents
systèmes. Merci beaucoup. Voilà. Merci beaucoup. Bridad, what's the way forward? In 1 minute, please.
Or less.
They say he who laughs last laughs best.
Richard, I think for us, the next step is really improving on the analysis. That's really important to develop robust analysis to support the NDCs. We already have health component in the NDC, so we are working on having the benefit on agriculture sector. We have the support for CCAC on that, and also costing elements. This is also very important in the NDC. In terms of perspective, also we would like to explore other sources of financing to support the SSCP implementation, such as the carbon markets, and also engage strongly the private sector. And then last words in terms of recommendation, maybe I think it's also important to strengthen the regional collaboration. We had the Africa regional assessment, but there are also measures that could be targeted efficiently at the regional level.
Thank you very much. Please give a round of applause to these amazing panelists. They have been exceptional and phenomenal, and thank you very much. You've heard it all. We need to engage each and every one, and by doing that, we will only take the work of CCAC and in combating short-lived climate pollutants forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think that was amazingly rich. Thank you. And thank you, Richard, for having done this so masterfully with the time as well. While you're allowed to get off the stage, a quick few announcements. As you know, we'll be splitting into breakout sessions. The breakout session, methane roadmap in the Africa region, will be in this room, so CR1. And the Latin America and Asia Pacific region session will be in Longonot, so in the tents over there that you by now know as well. So I think this will be extremely exciting to dive deeper into the methane roadmap development. So please don't miss it. Be with us over there. We'll still keep to the originally foreseen time, 11:15, to make sure that. Well, the coffee break, coffee is out there. Bring your coffee, maybe venture off already so that we don't lose the time. Yes, there's a photo being taken of the panel, which is fantastic. Another thing that I wanted to mention, for those of you who are part of the recorded panel discussion, so you know who you are, but I just mentioned Heather, Kimber, Peter, and Bruno. Please meet here at 12:45. We start punctually at 1 to record, so everybody needs to be here. That's here as well. And in the afternoon, we have other breakout sessions. Please look at the updated agenda, and I wanted to make sure we also keep in mind that there's a reception tonight. It's at the Trademark Hotel. And it's on Catalyzing Clean Air for Africa, hosted by U.S. Agency for International Development, the Clean Air Catalyst, WRI Africa, and the Environmental Defense Fund and AirQ. So just for you to keep that in mind, that's the moment when we'll all be together again, because all the rest of the day will be in separate sessions. And before you leave, please come here for a photo. We have done one yesterday already, but we wanted to do one more here. And I see Sandra is wishing to say something else. Oh, yes, sorry. I had that as well, and I promised I would say that at lunchtime. Please don't miss it. There's a lunchtime side event for those who are not doing the recording. You're expected to be at the lunchtime gender report launch. I think this is exciting. It will also be at the tent, so the Longonot tent. And we really look into the framework for gender-responsive livestock development, building a world free from hunger, malnutrition, poverty, and inequality. So that's what will be served for lunch over there. Thank you. If you could just line up here quickly, we have a photographer whom you won't see here, but who will be up there so that we're all visible on this. We have a photo outside, but we want to make sure that, well, with this nice background and the link to Unea, we have one in the room as well. Thank you.
Can some people move up here to the speakers row so that we can maximize the space? Thank you.